I never thought much about Tuesday mornings. They were the sort of days that slid past without leaving a mark. Half-washed mugs on the sink, laundry humming in the background. My phone lit up with messages I never answered. But that morning, she was at the small cafe near the corner, the one that smelled faintly of burnt toast and too strong espresso. I'd only started renting the upstairs unit from her a couple months back. Still, I wasn't used to seeing her outside the house. She sat by the window, hair pulled back, her glasses resting low on her nose. The sunlight leaned across the table like it belonged to her. I almost walked past, but she looked up, just quick enough to notice me before returning to her book. I ordered coffee I didn't need and sat 2 tables away, pretending to scroll through my phone. But I wasn't really reading anything. Every so often, I'd flick my eyes toward her hands. She had this way of turning a page almost too carefully, like the paper might bruise. "Long morning?" she asked eventually, not looking up. I wasn't sure she was talking to me until she tilted her chin in my direction. "Sort of," I said, pushing my thumb along the rim of the cup. "Class got canceled. Didn't feel like going back home yet." She gave the smallest smile, the kind that disappears before you can name it. Sometimes an empty schedule feels heavier than a full one. I didn't know what to do with that, so I nodded, eyes back on the coffee. There was a pause, not uncomfortable, just quiet. The kind of silence where you notice everything else. The tick of the ceiling fan, the scrape of a chair leg across the floor, the way her spoon tapped once against her mug before resting still. "You always order the same thing," she said after a while. That startled me more than it should have. "You've noticed." Her shoulders lifted slightly. "I've seen you here a few times. Black coffee. Never finish it." I laughed, low. Guess I like the idea of it more than the taste. Her gaze lingered, curious, but she didn't press. Instead, she went back to her book. Still, something about that exchange stuck with me. How she noticed something so small, something no one else ever seemed to. When she left, I stayed behind, waiting a few minutes so it wouldn't look like I was following her. By the time I walked back to the house, her car was already in the driveway. The rest of the day drifted by in small, repetitive motions. Rearranging books I'd already read, scrolling past conversations I didn't start, typing a message to an old friend and then deleting it before hitting send. Upstairs, the air felt too still, so I cracked the window, listening to the faint sound of her radio downstairs. Felt strange, sharing a space without really sharing it. Our lives stacked vertically, hers unfolding beneath mine, like a parallel I wasn't supposed to touch. That night, just as I was about to turn in, my phone buzzed. A message. "If the rain keeps up, the roof might be noisy. You can sleep in the spare room downstairs if it bothers you." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, unsure how to respond. And before I could stop myself, I typed back, "Will there be room for me?" I didn't send it. Not yet. I just sat there, watching the words blink back at me, as if waiting for me to choose who I was going to be tomorrow. I didn't send the message. I let the words sit there until the screen dimmed, then slipped the phone face down on the nightstand. Still, the thought of it lingered, like a held breath I couldn't quite release. The next evening, I came down to check the mail. She was in the kitchen, boiling water, the faint scent of chamomile drifting through the hall. She glanced up when she saw me. "Roof kept you awake?" she asked. I shook my head. "No. Guess I got used to it." She nodded, then reached for another mug without asking. "Tea." I wanted to say no. I didn't want to sit there pretending I belonged at her table, but my mouth betrayed me. "Sure." She set the mug in front of me, her movements unhurried, almost deliberate. The steam curled between us like something alive. We didn't speak for a while. Just the clink of her spoon, the distant hum of the fridge. She finally broke the silence. "You remind me of my nephew," she said. "He's about your age. Quiet, though. Always hiding behind headphones." I gave a small smile. "Guess that makes me predictable." "Not predictable." She looked at me then, steady. Just familiar. Her eyes held mine a second longer than I expected. I looked away first, pretending to cool the tea with a slow breath. She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. When I was in college, I used to sit in kitchens like this. Shared apartments, broken chairs, everything temporary. I thought once I got older, things would feel settled. Her words drifted off, but I felt the weight in them. A memory offered, not to be answered, just heard. Does it feel settled now? I asked before I could stop myself. She gave a laugh, soft but hollow. Not really. We let that sit. My mind spun with things I wouldn't say, that she was too young to sound so tired, that I noticed how carefully she carried herself, that sometimes when I heard her laugh through the floorboards, it made the walls feel less empty. Instead, I traced a finger along the rim of the mug. I don't know why, but being here feels different, like someone might notice if I'm gone. The words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise her. She didn't answer right away, but her gaze softened, and I felt my stomach twist. That was the risk of it, the noticing. She was in her mid-40s, widowed, the kind of woman who knew how to fix leaky faucets and pay bills on time. I was barely holding my own place in the world. There was a line here, clear as glass, and yet I kept stepping close enough to see my reflection in it. When I stood to leave, she reached to take my empty mug. Her fingers brushed mine. Just a second, no more. But it stayed with me longer than it should have. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The rhythm of living above her had started to feel like a pattern I didn't want to break. The clink of her keys at 6. The muffled voice on her late-night phone calls. The smell of her cooking drifting through the vents. Little things that shouldn't have mattered but somehow tethered me to the space. One night I came down to borrow a wrench. She was at the table, bills spread in uneven stacks, hair loose for once. She looked up, distracted, and motioned me in. "Top drawer," she said, pointing vaguely toward the kitchen counter. I opened the drawer, found the wrench and turned to go. But she sighed then, leaning back, rubbing her temples with the heel of her hands. "Tough day," I asked before I could think better of it. "Just numbers. Always numbers." She let out a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I used to think life was about big choices. Turns out it's just endless paperwork." I stayed in the doorway, shifting the wrench in my hand. "Want me to make coffee? Or tea, I guess?" She glanced at me, surprised, then softened. "Tea, if you don't mind." So I did. Filled the kettle, listened to it hiss, poured carefully into her chipped mug. She watched me like it was unusual, someone else using her kitchen. Maybe it was. When I set the mug down, she touched my wrist lightly, just to steady it. But her hand lingered a second too long. Neither of us moved. Then footsteps on the porch. A knock at the door. We broke apart instantly. She stood, smoothed her hair back. "That'll be Marta, my neighbor." I stepped aside, suddenly aware of how close we'd been. The door opened and a woman in her 50s bustled in, holding a plate of cookies. "For you," Marta said cheerfully. "So you don't work yourself into the ground." Her eyes flicked between us. A pause, then a smile that felt a little too knowing. I mumbled a thank you, retreating toward the stairs, but before I left, I caught her watching me. Just for a second, her lips pressed together, as if weighing something she wouldn't say. Back in my room, the silence pressed hard. I replayed it, the way her fingers rested on my wrist, the way she pulled back the moment someone else walked in. It wasn't nothing, but it couldn't be something. A few nights later, I found myself in the kitchen again. Late. She came in quietly, barefoot, holding her phone like she'd just stepped out of a call. "You're still awake," she said. "Couldn't sleep." We stood there in the half-dark, the only light the faint glow from the stove clock. For a moment, I thought she might say something more. I thought I might. Instead, she moved closer, close enough I could feel the warmth of her sleeve against mine. Her breath caught, just faintly, as if she'd considered leaning in. But she didn't, and neither did I. We just stayed there, on the edge of something that wasn't supposed to happen. It happened on a walk, the kind you take when the walls feel too close. The rain had stopped just an hour before. The air damp and heavy, sidewalks shining with thin puddles. She suggested it casually. "I need to clear my head. Come if you want." So I did. We walked without saying much, the sound of our steps filling the gaps. Her hands were buried in her jacket pockets. Mine kept brushing the edge of hers. Too close, too careless. Halfway down the block, a car slowed. A man leaned out. Someone she seemed to know, judging by her polite smile. They exchanged a quick word about repairs for the fence. It was nothing, just neighbor talk. But the way he looked at her, too familiar, too easy, struck something in me I hadn't expected. Something sharp. When the car pulled away, I shoved my hands deeper into my pockets. "You know everyone here," I muttered. She glanced at me, frowning at my tone. "I've lived here for years." "Of course I do." I didn't answer right away. My chest felt tight, words backing up where they shouldn't. Finally, I said, "Doesn't it get lonely? Talking to people who only see you as their neighbor or their landlady?" Her pace slowed. "And how do you see me?" That stopped me. The question hung there, heavier than the damp air around us. "I don't know," I said. "Not just that." We found a bench under a tree. She sat first, carefully smoothing the edge of her jacket. I sat beside her, close enough to hear the shift of her breath. She spoke quietly. "Sometimes I think I make things too easy for myself. Keep people at the door. Let them think they know me, but never let them in. Safer that way." Her eyes fixed on the wet pavement. I wanted to tell her I noticed. The way she double-checked locks. How she let her laughter fade fast when she realized someone was listening. How she hid pieces of herself even in the small hours when no one was watching. Instead, I said, "I don't think you're easy. At all." Her mouth twitched, half smile, half something else. Then she turned to me fully, and for the first time, she didn't look guarded. "You're young," she said, almost like an apology. "You'll leave. People your age always leave." "I don't want to." The words slipped out raw and unplanned. My throat tightened as soon as I said them. Her eyes softened, but there was pain there too. "You don't know what you want yet." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to steady myself. The air between us felt too charged, like it could ignite if I breathed wrong. She reached out then, her hand brushing my sleeve, pausing like she might take it further. But she didn't. She pulled back, folding her arms again. The silence pressed in, so thick it was almost a sound. And I thought if I asked her, really asked her, what would she say? After that night on the bench, something shifted. I expected more. Longer glances, another brush of her hand, anything that hinted we hadn't imagined it. But instead, she pulled back. The change was subtle at first. A closed door where it used to be left ajar. Short replies to questions that once trailed into late-night talk. She stopped making tea for two. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe she was busy, maybe nothing had really happened at all. But the silence felt deliberate, measured. One evening I came down, half expecting her at the kitchen table. Instead, I found only her note. "Gone to visit my sister. Back Sunday." The handwriting was steady, careful. Nothing personal. Nothing for me. That weekend dragged. I stayed upstairs, restless, scrolling aimlessly, half-writing messages I deleted before sending. I thought about asking where her sister lived, if she was okay, if she even wanted me to ask. But the words felt intrusive, like crossing a line she'd drawn. Sunday night came. The sound of her car in the driveway jolted me. I listened for footsteps, a door opening, her familiar movements below. But she didn't knock, didn't check in, just silence. When I finally saw her the next morning, She looked tired but composed. She greeted me with a polite nod, like we were no more than landlord and tenant again. Something inside me sank. Later that day, I overheard her on the phone, her voice low but sharp. "No, I told you it's over. Don't call again." The words carried through the vent, clipped and final. An ex, I guessed. Maybe more than an ex. I leaned back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the sound of her silence after hanging up heavier than any argument. I should have felt jealous. Instead, I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. That night, I went downstairs. I told myself it was for water, but I lingered at the bottom step, watching the faint glow of her lamp under the crack of her door. My hand hovered, almost knocking. Almost. But I turned back instead, climbing the stairs with the weight of words unsaid. In my room, the phone lit up. My thumb hovered over her name in the message field. I typed, "Are you okay?" Then deleted it. Typed again, "I'm here if you need anything." Deleted that too. I left the screen blank, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for me to decide who I was, or who I wanted to be. I set the phone down. The silence stretched. Her lamp went dark. And I stayed where I was, seat empty, door unopened, sentence unfinished. It was late again. The kind of late when the streets outside fell completely silent, when even the fridge seemed to hum too loudly. I came down for water, but she was already in the kitchen, standing barefoot by the counter, hands curled around a mug of tea. She looked up, surprised. "Couldn't sleep?" I shook my head. "You?" She gave a faint shrug, eyes drifting back to the steam. For a while, neither of us spoke. Just the steady tick of the clock above the stove, the hum of the house settling around us. I poured myself a glass, leaned against the counter opposite hers. The silence stretched, heavy but fragile, like glass about to crack. Finally, she said, "You've been quieter." I almost laughed at that. "I thought you wanted it that way." Her eyes flicked up, sharp, then softened. "No, I just didn't know what to do with it." I let that settle. My hand tightened around the glass, knuckles pale. "Do with what?" Her lips pressed together, like she wished she hadn't said it. "The way you look at me, the way I let you." I swallowed hard, pulse quick in my throat. "I don't mean to make things harder for you." "You do," she said quietly. Then, after a pause, "But maybe that's not the worst thing." Her honesty was a weight lifted and a weight added at the same time. I set the glass down, unable to keep still. "I don't know what you want me to do with this," I admitted. "Half the time I think I should stay out of your way. The other half My voice broke off. "You what?" she asked. I met her eyes. No escape left. "I don't want to leave. Not the house. Not you." She stared at me for a long moment, as if testing the truth of it. Her breath caught just once. Then she set the mug down carefully, like it might shatter. "You're too young," she whispered, though there was no conviction in it. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm here, and I see you. That has to count for something." The silence after was sharper than anything either of us had said. My heart pounded in the stillness. She took a slow step toward me, then another, until she was close enough that I could see the tired lines around her eyes, the hesitation written across her face. Her hand lifted, hovered at my arm, then finally rested there. Light, barely there, but real. I didn't move, didn't push it further. Just let the moment hold. Her gaze dropped, then returned to mine. And in that fragile second, I felt something give way. The walls, the waiting, the half-finished sentences. She didn't smile exactly, but her lips curved, soft, almost relieved. "Okay," she whispered, and that was enough. Time didn't change all at once. It stretched slowly, folding into routines the way rainwater sinks into pavement. We didn't make any grand declarations. No dramatic nights or desperate promises. Just a steady rhythm that grew between us, almost unnoticed. She still brewed tea in the evenings, but now there were 2 mugs, side by side. I still ordered black coffee at the cafe, still never finished it, but she'd smile across the table and remind me, "You like the idea more than the taste," and I'd let her drink the rest. Sometimes we walked, same as before, down damp sidewalks, the world quiet around us. But now when our sleeves brushed, neither of us pulled away. The bench was still there under the same tree. We sat again one afternoon, neither of us mentioning the first time. She leaned back, face tilted to the sky, and said, "Feels less heavy now." I didn't need to ask what she meant. Not everything was smooth. There were mornings she seemed far away, lost in old memories I couldn't touch. Nights when I wondered if she still believed I'd leave eventually. But when I lingered too long in those doubts, she'd place her hand on my arm, the same quiet gesture from the kitchen, and it was enough to anchor me. It wasn't perfect. It was better. Once, weeks later, she caught me hesitating at the door, thumb hovering like before. "What is it?" she asked. "Just thinking." She smiled, soft and knowing. "Don't overthink. Just stay." So I did. And in the ordinary hours, the 8:47 a.m. sound of her keys, the chipped mugs, the kettle whistling, the pages of her book turning too carefully, we found a rhythm that felt like something neither of us had expected. Not grand love, not dramatic rescue, just the quiet knowing that someone saw you and stayed. That night, sitting across from her, I caught her watching me, her expression almost amused. "What?" I asked. She shook her head, sipping her tea. "Nothing. Just, there's room after all." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence between us said everything.